there. Now this right here is a radiator, and this is what we're going to be fixing today. This is what I'm going to show you how to fix today. So I imagine that this is probably going to be the most watched video, because this is kind of the meat and potatoes of the whole deal. This is actually how to fix a radiator. So I'm going to take you through. We're going to go through this guy from pillar to post, and we're going to fix this guy up. I'm going to show you something real quick, which is this guy has a leak. So I know that not only are we going to rod this one out, but actually, I'm gonna have to turn this guy around here. Oh shit, no. All right. Not only are we gonna have to rod this out, but I know it has a leak because you can see right here, you can see the white, right? That white is hard water deposits that are making their way through and out. So that's how you can tell when a radiator has a leak in it. And I'm gonna do another video on that exclusively. But that's what a leak looks like. But the rest of it looks pretty clean. I don't see a whole lot of those white things around here. So we're going to be going through this one, and next thing is putting it in the washout tank and washing it out, making it clean. So we'll come back to that. So I already got the radiator in the washout tank here. I'm going to turn on the washout tank, get the pump going. I'm going to clean out the exterior and flush the interior of this radiator, try to get it as clean as I can before I start to work on it. So right now I'm flushing out the inside of the radiator. Trying to get as much loose stuff out of there as I can. The exterior of the radiator. Now we got it a little bit cleaner, time to take it apart. Okay, it's gonna get a little noisy in here, so I'll try to talk over all the noise best I can, and then I'm just gonna kind of show you. But this is our solder joint right here, okay? This is what holds this tank onto the core, which is that part. So we're gonna have to unsolder this guy right here. So I got my torch lit up there. I have my I'm not gonna show it to you, it's a compressed air. And then we're gonna take that apart. So I'm just gonna kind of show you how to do this, because you're not gonna be able to hear very much. Okay, I'm back. Got my fan on, I got my gloves on, I got my safety glasses on. Not a bad idea even to wear a mask, because you're gonna get a lot of smoke. But that's all right. I'm not gonna do it now, because then you wouldn't be able to hear me at all. So again, what I'm gonna do is take this tank off, access our cords here, that way I can clean this radiator out. Alright, take a bite out of this thing. Now make sure to get that torch right in there at that seam. I don't want to stay too long on it. Blow your solder out. You want to keep your torch kind of always moving. If it stays in the same spot too long, you're going to burn a hole in it. Which you will. Everybody does. Take some breath. coming out pretty easy. It's flowing out. Sometimes it'll pop and really not flow out very easily. Makes it a little harder to do. But this is coming out pretty well. Solder's basically out, but you always have a little bit of leftover, so I kind of heat it up. Okay, now that we got our tank off, that exposes the cores of the radiator. This right here, these guys are what the water flows through to cool it, right? And then your fins here, that disperses the heat. So what we got to do on a rod out is take our rod, which is this. You get the size that goes in there, and you put it through here, and you literally roto-rooter these guys out. You punch all that garbage out of there, and that way it makes the radiator clean. So I'll let you watch me do that next. Okay, so what I like to do next, like I said, everything's got to be clean, clean, clean. So take this. I should have my safety glasses on, but they're over there. All right, so I'm gonna get all those hard water deposits off as much as I can. Like this, clean out the seam, clean out those tubes. So get all that stuff out of there. Test it in. Make it as clean as I can, right? Okay, now probably this is gonna be one of those slick things I've seen on YouTube before where people, speed up the video real quick. Or actually, I probably will just do a few of them for you because pretty easy to get the idea. So you kind of come in here, take your rod, push it through, go down to the next one, okay, rinse, repeat, do every single one of those. This one doesn't appear to be too dirty. Sometimes you get ones that are super hard to go through. If you get ones that are so hard that you can't even get a rod through it, I don't continue on with those anymore because the chances of that decaying the inside of the radiator, sitting there decaying and making the radiator no good are pretty good. So anyway, that's how you do that, and I'll take it back when we're going to sandblast our tank. Okay, so what we did was I went through each individual tube, rodded it out, and now I got it back in my flush tank. Now that we have all that gunk that was in there, we kind of moved that back, we moved it around. Now I'm gonna zoo gun this out. Now we have one of our tanks still on. So what I'm gonna do, here I'll show this to you. I am going to put the zoo gun in right in here, and I'm gonna flush it out so that it flushes all that water back and flushes all that gunk out. Now we got a clean radiator. So I'll kind of, oh, come on, what you doing? This thing's going crazy now all of a sudden. Oh, sorry about that. Let me get this thing back to where it's supposed to be. Oh, there we go. All right. Well, we'll figure it out. I'm not exactly a big tech guy. I'm definitely better at radiators than I am with this stuff. So, all right, here we go. Flush it out. Flush all that gunk out of there. I'll try to do this for you here too. I'm also flushing the tank off a little bit, but we're going to sandblast that in a minute. So let me see if I can always take a bath always. All right, let's see here. Now, when you're flushing this out, you can see when I flush it, see all that coming out there? Okay. That means we got a clean radiator. All those ports are open and flushing clean. So the rod out part is done. Now we got to put it back together. Okay, so here we are at my sandblast cabinet. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to sandblast this guy, make it nice and clean. If you don't have a sandblast cabinet, you can use a wire wheel or kind of whatever. You just want to get that metal as clean as possible. That way you can, it makes it easier to plate, makes it easier for the solder to stick and all that good stuff. Now one thing I'm going to do and I'm going to show you is I have plugs. I have plugs that go in your tranny cooler here. You want to plug these. You do not want to sandblast these and get sand inside your transmission cooler. So I'm going to go through that right there. So, all right, put it in my sandblast cabinet. I'm going to sandblast this guy and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's all done. Okay, went ahead and sandblasted my tank. Probably should have my fan on at this point. Okay. All right. But so you guys can hear me. I won't. So now you can see that's all sandblasted. I went around, I sandblasted every solder joint that I may have to repair. I sandblasted that to make it a lot easier to repair. So just look at that. Just like downtown, baby, nice and clean. Now I'm going to show you how to put it together. Okay, so I got my tank set up right here. It's already been sandblasted. So now I got to use my tinning compound here, and I got to plate it. I got to tin it so that the solder sticks real nice. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the core of the radiator, and then put it together. So I got my mask on, I got my glasses on, I got the fan on, I got everything. So I'll try to speak as loud as possible so that you can hear what I'm saying here. But I'll probably end up doing one of those real fancy YouTube things and like speed up the video. You know, they do that real fancy like that. So anyway, I'm gonna get started on this. I'll let you guys see what I'm doing and put this thing together. Playing the fire is easily the funnest part. The hotness right there. That's about where you want your feather to be. What I'm doing is I'm getting this right around the solder joint. Right where I'm going to have the solder, I just place it. So I go around my outlet as well. I know we're going to have to do that. So it's real clean. That's why we sandblasted it, right? Get all the dirt off that metal. That way it plates up real easy. That's why you give time to do that fancy speed up thing. Okay, so now we got our tank nice and tinned up. I'm going to do the same thing here. This is the trough right here. This is a trough where our solder goes in right here. Our tank goes in here, and this is the trough where the solder goes as well. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to tin right in here, right? And then put the tank in here and then tin them both together. But I'm going to get this all tinned so that way we have a perfect seal between the tank and the core. How you doing? So I just noticed in that last video that I was doing the end of the core with the big torch and tinning it that way. But you don't want to use the big torch to do the whole trough, because you'll get it too hot and you'll melt out all the tubes. So sorry that I don't have the video part of that, but I wanted to tell you so you don't make a mess and melt out all the tubes. But what you do is I use the smaller torch, and then I have a piece of metal that's basically shaped kind of like this, and I put that over the tube to protect it from the heat, and then you can get in that trough and tin the trough. But don't try to do it with the big torch. So sorry I don't have that part of it on the video, but don't do it with the big torch because you'll melt everything out. All right, thanks. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and take my tank, set it in here, and then put everything together. This tank is pretty good. There's not a lot of waves or anything in it, so it'll fit in there into the trough pretty well. Set that in there like that. I've got the same clamps. That'll keep it on there nice and snug. Okay. The tank's in there. The whole thing is in the trough. Make sure when you put it back together, you put it with the facing the right way. Every radiator man I ever know who's been in it long enough, we've all put the tank on backwards. You got to take it apart and do it again. So you don't want to do that. Got those super busy days, midsummer, and you're like, man, that's the last thing I want to do. I have to do this thing twice. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and plate these together now. I just like it to be super clean. I'm going to run my solder pads. Now there's kind of a black flag that this stuff leaves behind, and that can actually pollute the weld. So I'm going to blow this out, right? Get all that out of there. I'll show you what it looks like, but I really can't do both these at the same time. Now I'm going to take my plug. Again, different people have different ways of doing this. This is the way I do it. Take my plug. This breaks up all the oxide. Again, just to make that solder flow in there nice and smooth, and then I kind of take that out. That'll leave by a little bit of that plug coating. Now it's ready to be put back together. So I get my solder, I got my torch, and I go right in here with the seam. And it's flowing real good right in there. And this is my first pass. I usually use 2 passes. this one's my hotter pass to make it go all the way up and around the tank. So again, that's my first pass, that's the hot pass. Wait for it to cool down just a little bit. I take my flux again, and kind of break up the oxides on that solder so that the second pass can flow in there real nice. And I'll try to kind of do a little something here so you guys can see the second pass and kind of how it flows and what I'm doing. I'll roll off the excess there. I'll show you on this side here. Now I'm going to run this one a little colder. Sometimes I use my small torch for this, or you can use the big one. You just got to run it a little. Got that kind of feather on it, a little bit colder. And I run the second pass. And I like to fill that whole trough up with this pass. And I'll kind of show you, figure out a slick way to show you guys how this looks from my perspective. Okay, let's see if I can handle this here. Oh boy. Okay. So, I'm trying to get it so you can see what's going on here, but so I've already done, this is my second pass here. So you can see this is a little bit colder of a pass, right? And I'm basically just taking that new solder and letting it flow real nice in that trough. There we go. See, that trough is full. Oh, hey now. Told you I wasn't much of a techie here. There we go. Okay. So anyway, that's it. I got to kind of complete this. Complete this, and then I'll turn it around and do the other side. But you can see kind of how I was working the flame in that trough there. Sorry for the difficulties there. Okay, so I'm going to finish up my steam. I just wanted to show you guys kind of how that looks. Like to go over everything, make sure I have no cold edges with my solder. It's all one nice even flow in that trough. Now, I've got my other side to do, right? So I'm going to do this side, same as the other side. Make sure that's nice and set. And then I'll bring you guys back when I'm about ready to test it. Alright, so I hope you can appreciate my beautiful crane shot here. I'm trying to show you guys what I'm doing. Now this, I use my finer torch for this because this is a smaller solder joint that I'm going to be working with. But this will give you guys a real nice view of how to do this. So this is our solder joint that goes around our outlet. So I take my flux, right? And I kind of break up all those oxides that are on here so that our solder will flow real nice. Make sure all this stuff is out of the way. Get all your dirt and stuff out of there. Okay. Blow off our excess. And this is just a little excess piece I had from a different job, so I'm going to use this. So this is always tricky. You got to kind of know where to keep your heat, because on different ones you'll have different thicknesses of metals. But you can see it when it's clean, that solder just kind of flows right around. Oh, you can see a little flaw right there. You can see the bubbles come out. When you got bubbles, that's a flaw. So you got a little piece of dirt in there or something like that. So you either have to re-tin it, or if it's just something minor, you can just kind of scrape it out of the way like I did right there. But on this, I'm kind of keeping my heat a little higher up on the tube itself. That way it kind of flows right in and right down in that small trough that we have to work with there. Okay, so that's that. So you can see how to do a finer repair. Now I know that we're gonna have a leak down there. Cross our fingers we don't have too many more leaks in this guy, and I'll try to show you best I can how we do those kind of repairs as well. Okay, so this is kind of an interesting deal here. But what I have is I have this set up, okay? I put my air into it. I got my plugs in here. I got air going through this. This is a 16-pound radiator, 13 to 16-pound cap. I usually go a little bit over, like 18 pounds. So I got about 18 pounds in this right now of air pressure, which is less forgiving than water pressure, okay? And I don't have any leaks. Now, I know that guy right there is leaking. I know it because you can see it. Sometimes that hard water, those hard water deposits, that white stuff gets so hard that it'll actually harden in there and actually kind of stop its own leak. Kind of like a rusty water pipe that gets rusted and quits leaking. But I know that's a leak, so I'm gonna go ahead and redo it because I don't want that stuff breaking out at some point and having a customer have a leak with a radiator that I recently went through. So I'm gonna go ahead and redo it. And it's gonna be tricky to show you guys, but I'm gonna try to show you best I can how to do a fine repair in there. Usually get the one around it too a little cleaner because there's a good possibility that's going to be, we're going to have to touch that one too. These are definitely the trickiest kind of repairs for this because it's the smallest area that you have to work in, and it's a small solder joint. So I get my small torch out. It's about the heat that I work with right here. And just a second here. Of course, this is going to tap my phone. Right into the drink, so we don't want that now. So I have my air here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that old solder and get it out of there. And see, I kind of have my flame pointed down at the base. Now that, you don't want to point it. You don't want to point it right at the tube because the tubes are thinner than the base. Okay. So you want to try to get as much of that old solder out of there as possible. See you later. That's my dad. Bye, Dad. He's the grandmaster. We'll put him on tape for you at some point. Say hi. So I'm trying to get all this stuff out. This stuff You can tell there was a leak there because this solder is not flowing out as easy as the other solder. It's kind of still sticking in there. Which isn't doing me any favors either here. So I'm getting out as much of that old solder as possible so that I can get our tin in here. This is tin. Like I said, I'm pointing that more at the base because you don't want to go into the side of the tube because you'll put a hole in it real quick. So get around. Try to get. Let me adjust my torch a little bit there. Okay. I'm trying to get this at the base as much as possible. And then hit it with our tin. Should have probably cleaned my torch before this video. But we'll get it to work. I hope you guys are able to see this. It's real difficult to try to get in there. But you got to get, the tricky part is that the tube is roundish, and you got to try to tin behind the tube, even though you can't exactly access it. So you're kind of, shooting in the dark with those, but it's kind of the way it is. You can't get behind it. So then that's my tin. Again, I plate it and then blow that out so to get all the pollutants out of there. And I got my solder here. And again, I put my flame not on the tube. I put it kind of behind it. Kind of try to push the solder in there a little bit too. Make sure to get behind the tube as much as we can when we're fixing it. So get your heat a little bit back there. And so this can be real tricky sometimes because you're trying to get old solder and new solder to go together from the tube that's behind it or alongside of it, and fix the new and have our new repair work for us. So let's see if this guy's gonna work. So I take my flux, instead of putting it into the drink, I'll just use my flux first, because if I didn't quite get it, you don't want it to get wet. And then you have to get all that off. But how are we looking here? I think pretty good. I hear something, but I think it's coming out of here. I'm not seeing any bubbles. So let me see if I can take, yep, not seeing any bubbles. So I think we got that. It's basically just a solder joint that goes around that tube, real small, and I think we got all of it. If we didn't get all of it, if there was a pollutant or something in there, it would come out. So let me take this down and I'll kind of show you what I'm doing here. So here's an up close look at that tube. And so hopefully you guys were able to see it, but see, I'm using my flux to just test it. Now, if there's any trouble with that tube, you'd see little bubbles coming out of there. And I think we got it. Again, there's some of these are easy to fix and some of these are real hard because they're old, they're rotten, and they just don't tin up very nicely. But I'm gonna go ahead and do a final check on this, final pressure test, and then we should be good to go. Okay. All right. So we got our Radiator on test here. It's been on test for about 10 minutes. And I don't see any bubbles coming out, so we successfully rodded and fixed this GM radiator. I think this one's out of an old GM pickup, from what I'm remembering correctly. One thing you always want to check out too, oh, you know what? I lied. We've got some bubbles coming out right here. No, that's right around our, that is right around our transmission cooler right there. I see a couple little bubbles coming out. That's pretty typical for those. Those transmission cooler, they can have some, they get real dirty, so they oftentimes have problems with them. They jiggle around a lot and stuff like that. So I'll take you through this and we'll go ahead and fix this guy too. We'll take our plugs out because you can't work with solder and torches and all that stuff when you have water in anything. Obviously you can't solder something with water in it. So get a little water out. Okay. Shut our air off. There we go. This is unlike any other solder joint. I'll probably use my small torch to resolder it, but I'll use my bigger torch to get this old solder out of here. Now I'm glad I have a chance to show you this though, because these tranny cooler areas can be a little bit difficult because they have a ring that kind of holds it in place and then the solder goes around it. But so dirt can get kind of inside and outside and all over that ring. So it's a little harder sometimes to get all the dirt out of the way so you can fix these. This one's coming along pretty good though, so I don't think we'll have an issue. So again, I got my tin, I'm plating that. Get my flux, kind of get that slag. You can see that black stuff, that black slag that's left behind. Oh. There we go. So, blow that off. Now that's nice and clean. Go over to my finer torch here. Heat it back up a little bit so everything flows around real nice. Now this here is heavier than the outside, so I like to keep my heat a little bit more on the cooler itself. That way, as you can see, you keep your heat there. That's where that solder will travel. We're doing pretty good. There we go. That's coming out pretty nice. Not a lot of pollutants in that, which make it a lot easier. So now what I'll do is I'll cool it off using my flux. Wait, it'll splatter if you cool it off too quickly, but so give it a second there. Put my air back into it, and once again, I think we got it. No bubbles there, so we took care of that leak as well. I'm going to retest it, and then we should be good to go.